First question I wanted to ask you, having just seen that, is after a series of a big emotional journey and a ride, you say something, well, we're told at the end, who are we once you've gone through that? If memories go and they disappear, and who are we without that, or what do we become? And it's quite a haunting notion, but I wondered if you wanted to talk a bit about that and what your thoughts were on it.
Well, obviously the film came from a personal experience. For me it's about a person who was somebody, and uniquely somebody quite strikingly amazing, somebody who was religious, somebody who had a love affair with the church, and then to lose every notion of who you are, of what we're about, I think is just something really quite awful. And do you personally
think, yeah, absolutely. And do you think that's more difficult or less difficult if religion or theology or belief is involved in it?
It's an interesting question. To me, I don't know. I mean, for me, with it being a personal film and the relationship that I was dealing with, which was obviously the story of my aunt and her being a nun, I think there's a lot of conflict of what is meant to be kind and what is not meant to be kind. I think for somebody who is religious, I think being diagnosed with Alzheimer's is a huge banging to their kind of, what is the protection about? But it's not a bash against religion. It really is about a love affair for a woman, with religion.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, in terms of setting the location and the context, was that because it was on boundaries and borders of the ocean and land, meaning on the periphery of anywhere? Was that, how did that come about?
Truthfully, it was the budget. I was given 20 actors from Central School of Speech and Drama. I went to see these actors who are all from different parts of the world. And with that came a certain amount of money. And I thought to myself, what can I do with these lovely, gorgeous-looking people who are so young and beautiful? And I could have done various things with the story, and I could have kind of gone a different way, I think, but I chose to do something where they could play with an ensemble, they could do multiple characters, and in a way they could fit into a film where they, for Betti, in her own mind, people remain the same age, nobody changes, which I thought was an interesting way to go about it. And then I went to pick, I certainly knew we couldn't afford lights, so I went to Dungeness and I went to the Gower where I grew up, and Camber Sands, and I wanted to really think about, okay, somebody with Alzheimer's, and from my own personal experience, somebody with no structure in their mind, which means I didn't need 4 walls to do everything. Hence the fact I picked Dungeness because it's quite biblical. It's also that colourful kind of the sea and the grey, and I could splash all the primary colours that I wanted to splash onto the film. And to be honest with you, for the poor actors, it was 90 miles an hour wind most days and hard work for them. But it worked, and for me, it's one of those things where we could get away with somebody living within their mind. If it rained, it could rain. If it snowed, it could snow. It didn't matter. So that was part of the reason I chose the landscapes in a way that we could shoot outside, add all the colours, and just add, in a way, just not feature that structured mind where we have walls and we have ceilings and everything is closed in on us. It's purely open.
Yeah, I think that bit worked really well as a metaphor and also visually, and you choreographed and worked really beautifully with the actors, and I think also with music as well. It was very haunting and compelling, and it reinforced everything in a very charming and beautiful way. I suppose there's a lot of references throughout the film to Sisyphus, guilt, the notion of carrying the weights on our shoulders. At the beginning, we're born to die, carrying the coffin, and this journey and trajectory. To what extent do you think that when people go on this journey, in your experience, that they can understand what's happening as you go along it, and you share some of that in a way as someone who would die in a different way would, and to what extent is it completely different to that?
Do you mean as an audience watching film or personally?
Personally.
I think grief is a very strange thing, and I think we all deal with grief very differently. I think, you know, for somebody who is diagnosed with an illness they know which will eventually lose themselves, whether they lose their children, whether they lose who they are. I think for the outsider watching this happen, it's a very difficult journey, and I think it's a journey where you start thinking to yourself, what if that was me? What if I started to lose? What if I forgot who my mother was, or my father, or the people I love mostly in this world? And I think we just go on this journey where, you know, for me, what I wanted to do for the audience was put somebody in the mind of somebody who had Alzheimer's, who you can sit with for 10 minutes and try and figure out their life. Now, I did this twice a week, going to a home with people with Alzheimer's, where all they had was photographs. Most of them didn't know what the photographs were, but they're given photographs of their lives, which they have to look at. And it's like a production line they go through. There's no feeling, especially in the latter stage. It's just photographs. It's just pictures. And I think, in a way, you know, for my journey, I don't know. I'll tell you when I get there.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that you did with the actors and how the decisions you made and how you worked together with them and to convey what you wanted to do. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I met the actors from Central. I looked at them and I thought, God, they're really attractive and young. I then asked if it was okay to bring one of my own actors in, which was Illona, beautiful Illona. And then really working, we did a lot of kind of impros of letter writing. I mean, there was 19 actors, and this was a film that was shot over 14 days. We literally had, in total, 3 months to make the entire film, from writing to finishing. We did a lot of improvisations of letters, getting to know Betti as a character. Young Betti, Jessica, you know, had a really tough job because she's from California. She probably didn't know, but she's a very good northern accent. And it was more to do with getting them to really understand working as an ensemble. My decision to make the actors work as an ensemble, I think, was quite tough for them as well, because, you know, they go to drama school. It really is about one-to-one acting now. It's not like it was years ago where it's like, okay, we become a team of actors. And the whole chorus, the ensemble, and getting them to play different characters, I think they did a great job. Rehearsal-wise, we'd hardly had any rehearsal time, but, you know, it really is about, for me, they got on set and they did what they were asked to do, and if not more. I think the hardest part for them was learning to dance for most of them. That was quite difficult, yeah.
And I think that more and more people have had to come into some kind of experience or contact with dealing with Alzheimer's, as generally people live longer and becoming more and more common, unfortunately. But I wondered what your thought individually, but also how we see it as an audience, how you would perceive it in terms of when that process happens to someone, what legacy they actually leave aside from themselves, their own mental consciousness, their own memories fade and they go through that process, but how you see what legacy they leave, how that's understood.
Well, I think it's you know, it's down to the individual to keep their stories alive. I think the saddest thing about Alzheimer's is that you do lose stories. You know, my aunt was from a very small working class Welsh town. She became a nun because women couldn't travel at the time she was growing up, and she was desperate to travel. She then worked in Uganda for 19 years, I think it was. And then, you know, she was forced out with the Idi Amin and all this. I mean, these incredible stories. But stories that people will forget, and they will not be retold unless we get hold of them and start saying, you know, let's make stories out of this. And dealing with the Alzheimer's thing, you know, you can go two ways about it. I watch a lot of work regarding Alzheimer's, and I find it, you know, it's very depressing, and it is a depressing disease. But there's also a disease there which is, I think, dare I say it, there's a great deal of freedom and fear has gone from your life. You know, in a way, you're consciously very free. But then there's a great deal to lose.
Yeah. There's a moment where the discussion of happiness happens, and Betti reflects on it, and it seems as though what's being said is that there isn't any happiness, but I'm not sure that was the right thing to draw from that, conclude. What was that, the thing about happiness? I mean, happiness is talked a lot about today, and it's meant in a different way perhaps to how Aristotle meant it. But what was you meaning with that?
Which scene are you talking about?
Where it was in the later part where it's a reflection on life and then asked about happiness and being happy.
What is happy? Do I portray it in a way as bad happiness?
I'm wondering that with the character, that is it a reflection on all these things in this story that happens in her life, what happens with George and what happens in these experiences, and in the end, there isn't happiness, or is there a lot of...
I think there's happiness in the end for her.
Right.
If she's allowed to do what she wants to do, which is go.
Right.
There's a whole other topic there, but I think happiness is of being left alone and being allowed to kind of make the decisions that she wants to make. But again, it's that fraction of guilt that stops her. It's the religion of George being the figure of Christ, or a man or whatever who she idolised. It's the letting go, and the ending where there is that crossroads of where she does leave that. To me, that's her happiness. That's her own decision.
I mean, I want to come out to the audience and get some questions from you guys in a moment. But to what extent do you think that faith or religion, I've kind of asked this question, but it's a different way of asking it now, can help people today, not just people who are suffering it, but those around them who are not actually got the illness? To what extent do you think that can help, or these days in the Nietzschean God is dead, that doesn't really exist for people, and it's not a tonic?
I think religion's a very personal thing, really very personal, and I think we all, people grasp onto it for certain reasons. I think life will take you on a journey where you may not believe in anything, and then all of a sudden you do, just to give you something strength. It's a very personal thing. That's all. That's I think it's for each and everyone their own journey.
Well, I'd like to see if people have got some questions or some points or anything they'd like to ask or say. You could pop your hands up and just go for it. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you some more about George. George was the one figure in the film that I was trying to figure out all the way through, and I'd love to know, where he sprang from and what he represents in the film. That's okay.
Yes, of course. George represents, as far as confused in her own mind, of maybe a figure of her father or her brothers, within a working man kind of figure, but that's who he is to her. And the whole thing, the whole Georgie Porgy putting in pie, confusing the name of George, Jesus, it's all about her own mind mingling all these thoughts. But to her, he is Jesus.
And as a male figure, absolutely powerful, because that's what came across to me.
Yeah, hugely.
It didn't matter that I didn't know quite who he was, and it sort of did, it was probably someone different for everybody.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, it should be. For me, it's the film that you really just sit there. I know it's a very difficult thing for an audience to kind of say. I know it's hard, and what we're asking you to do is very difficult. Is to kind of take this film and really just take it in yourselves and in a way digest it, and whoever it relates to you, then put it there. But for Betti herself, it was Jesus.
What's amazing is that it was also a bloke.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No, I didn't mean that in a bad way. Because all the other blokes in the show, are, they're doing all the stuff you might expect blokes to do. Like sort of dancing with girls and doing stuff with girls.
Yeah, the two of them are very separate. Right from the beginning, they're quite remarkably odd. But they work so beautifully together, I think. I think, performance with Joe and Betti is just really strong. And there's a relationship there that's, I think, it just goes very undercurrent, and there's a tie there. There's something holding them both together. Sorry, he's a bloke.
No, I'm really glad that I think it's the most amazing thing about the film.
I wanted to ask on that as well, because is it the case that she is exceptional and different from the get-go, from the start? It may be perhaps in your mind, but for all of us, or is it the case that the merging of her dreams and her memories and what's changing and how that's being processed means that that's just how she's reflecting on it.
I think it's how she's reflecting on it. I mean, everything takes place within her mind, apart from obviously the scenes in the home, but everything is in her mind. The confusion, you know, seeing everybody in yellow as children and all these things are all about her mind and how she's seeing things. I think for anybody who gets a calling from, a religious calling from a very early age, certainly stands alone in a world where I think, you know, it's a very powerful thing. I remember my aunt talking about it, you know, and being, you know, at the age of 12, having a huge calling, but felt completely sincere and grown up about it. I think, you know, that's what we would do with Betty. You know, the moment where she sees him in the sea, you know, the childhood and everything going on behind her, it's a very grown-up thing to happen. It's pure love. It's an instant love. And I think, you know, for Betty and within her own mind, she's just developing this story of a love story, a relationship, which obviously was to her.
Yes, at the back there.
Previously, also portrayed quite a cruel character though as well. Is that your perception or Betty's?
I think that's Betty's perception. I think it's cruel. I don't think I would say cruel. I would say torn. I think her in her own mind, she gives him human emotions, which are represented by, you know, loss. You know, the moment he discovers her being pregnant, how she represents seeing him as a man in torture. This is all about her own mind and how she's dealing with the conflict of guilt. I think she sees it that way. Yeah, I think she sees it that way. I think Betty sees it in the way that, especially in the bit where she says, "Why are you making me suffer?" He says, "Not suffer, endure." I think that is her relationship with him. That is not me. I mean, I don't go out to make Jesus Christ cruel, but I think that is more to do with the character of how she perceives her relationship with him.
There was someone over here, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very powerful, very beautiful, emotionally and evocative film, but is that too different enough? The big red handbag. How's that? I love it.
How does that work, sorry? We got the red handbag and then...
What I'm saying, it's a very beautiful film, emotionally evocative film, and all the other serious issues. But I love the big, massive red handbag.
It is for sale if you wish to buy it. I mean, the handbag comes in for me is a whole thing of it's about baggage. It's about how big your baggage becomes. It's about, you know, how big. I've always wanted. I do have a thing about oversizing everything. It's probably just me, but I do have this irritation of I'm going to say something really awful now. Women in handbags. And at the tills, wherever you go, it's always, I'll bring my handbag out, even though everything's been through, and now here comes my handbag. And I think with women, for me, personally speaking, I was just thinking, how big is my handbag going to get when I certainly reach an age where everything I've lost goes into my handbag, which just becomes bigger and bigger for me.
Yeah, no, I thought it was red.
Did you?
I thought it was red. But also has that like nails.
Yes, it was made by the incredibly talented Michael Breakey, who I've worked with for many, many years. And Rita, and it is for sale for £3,000.
Yeah. I want to talk a bit about the process of you making the film, but suffering and endurance, is there a difference and a distinction? What would you say it is?
I don't know, I think suffering and enduring, you know, I think there is a difference for me personally, and I think for anybody who sees anybody who they love suffering, I think it does become an endurance for us, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that in a cruel way or without being, you know, loving anybody, or I think to watch somebody suffer who is you're very attached to, becomes an endurance for you more than anything else.
And just that symbolism of the bags and the big bag and carrying it. I mean, were you trying to say, aesthetically in a film, are you trying to say that everybody just gets bags full of stuff and experiences, and that's how it is? Or were you also saying that when an experience like this happens, happens. You shed some of the things and you dispense with them, and that may be a useful thing. There may be an element of freedom in it. Was that part of it?
Yeah, I think we go through life, and I think as you go through life, we pick up things and we get rid of things. I think it's a normal thing to do. I think, we sometimes fill our bags, we get hurt, we get betrayed, we pile it all inside us, and then we release it. It's almost like purging constantly. You carry, you purge, you carry, you purge. I think that's what life is. I don't mean to make life depressing, but, part of it is that aspect.
Yes?
I want to ask about another, I don't know if it's a symbolism for you or not, but the fact that his daughter is a soldier or has some kind of relation with military, I was a bit confused.
You were confused with the daughter aspect.
Yeah.
I think for Betti it was a whole thing of looking at her daughter who became a military woman, who and confusing issues of what were now and what were then. I mean, I went through a lot with this, and the whole thing of the song and the bell, and trying to make Betti this kind of figure of who her daughter was. But for Betti, her daughter was a soldier, and the daughter was a soldier who did die in a war. But was it Afghanistan? And if it was Betti, it was, yes. But you were confused with the daughter being a soldier, or
Yeah. Why was that?
why was the daughter a soldier?
Yeah. Why do you think that was wrong?
Well, I think the daughter she was a medic. She was a doctor in the army, which I think is a lot of people do if they want to join the army. I think more to do with travelling. Unlike today, obviously when Betti was around, Betti became a nun, and for her daughter she became a soldier, which are the two opposites of everything what they're about. For two women who wanted to see the world, one becomes a nun, one becomes a soldier. That was really my working on there, and the fact that obviously, it was a script put together in a way of how do we fit this character in? What does she die of? How does she go? What is the bag about? How does she return? And for me, the soldier is the way of almost like the twin of Betti, who was a nun, but in a very different world, women become soldiers.
So did you actually think that conflict between war and peace and this type of traveling around?
Yeah, well, absolutely two different women. One who believed in the Bible and believed in truth and peace, and one who also believed in peace, but in a very different way.
We all do bring our bags to things, and so when I watched it,
You got one with you.
I have it. It's constantly. Yeah, it reminded me of a few things. Carlos Castaneda, as though death is always on your shoulder, but also things like Waiting for Godot and even Dogma to a certain extent. But I wondered that you talked about at first when you said the process and the location part a lot to do with budget. But to what extent, if you had a much bigger budget, in terms of your work with the actors and the freedom, I thought it was really quite brilliantly done in many ways, the use of the space and the locations, and sometimes restrictions afford opportunities. But would you, even with bigger budget, do similar process and employ that? I thought it was very effective.
Yeah, hugely. Every film I make is set within big landscapes. It's an aesthetic choice for me. I love being outside. I love taking performance outside. I don't particularly like walls, I don't like being shut in, but give me a big landscape and a lot more money. And
So just on that, and this is the East End Film Festival, which does aim to encourage and present new and good directors. Do you want to just talk a bit about, it's difficult making a feature, and that process a little bit, and how you managed to get it done. Just tell us a little bit about that.
When I was offered the challenge to do it, I loved the challenge of it, to be honest with you. I loved the challenge of taking 20 actors who I didn't know, trying to make a feature. I loved the fact that we had a certain amount of time to do it and a certain budget. And I think it's a great challenge. For some reason, it does give you a huge amount of freedom. I work with a great team, and without them, none of it would be possible. Seriously. It really is about getting your team together, who are also excited by what we do, and we know we've worked together for a long time, so we know what we're going to do. It's going to be very different, a little strange, but we love doing it. And I think for us, the process of taking those actors, taking them outside, and just making them work in a way that, you know, as a feature, this is very low budget. We didn't really go over 9 hours a day, I'm going to be honest with you. We were very good. But constantly outdoor shooting is hard work. It's the elements that exhaust you. But, you know, we had a great time. They're inspired. Part of your job as a filmmaker is to inspire a crew. You know, get them out there and we have great fun. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, are there some more questions or from anyone? Well, I just want to say as well that often these days, and particularly in bigger budgeted films, we're often told that things have to be about very genre-led and action. And I think it's a testament to really fabulous filmmaking that you can reflect on things of the mind, but also do it in an aesthetic and a beautiful way. So I think we should all congratulate the writer and director. I'm really very good. And I have a feeling we'll be seeing some more of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much for doing. Cheers. Thank you very much.